Breaking. Britain's most unpopular prime minister in recorded history is facing the fight of his political life. And what's happening right now has sent shockwaves through Westminster that could reshape British politics forever. Keir Starmer has plummeted to approval ratings so catastrophic they're worse than Liz Truss, the woman famously outlasted by a lettuce. Reform UK under Nigel Farage is now leading national polls for the first time ever. And the British public is abandoning Labour in numbers that have political analysts calling this the most dramatic collapse in modern political history. If you want to stay ahead of stories like this that reshape nations, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to see will change how you think about British democracy forever. Here's what sparked the biggest political earthquake Britain has seen in decades. Westminster is in complete chaos tonight.
Keir Starmer faces crisis after Nigel Farage's fiery debate. Nigel Farage walked into the House of Commons and delivered a speech intended to reframe the national conversation around trust, migration, and economic confidence. He began really from the ground up, invoking a petition from his constituency, which he said was signed by 8,000 residents in Clacton, and used that figure as evidence of a profound disconnect between voters and Westminster. By starting with a local petition, he converted a constituency grievance into a national story about
Nigel Farage has risen in the House of Commons, invoking petitions from thousands of constituents who feel betrayed by their government. He's framing his attacks around trust, migration, and economic confidence, the very issues that resonate most deeply with ordinary Britons who feel abandoned by Westminster elites. Just over a year after winning what seemed like an unshakable landslide victory, Keir Starmer has become the most despised leader in British polling history. His net approval rating has crashed to -44%, making him more unpopular than every prime minister on record. The prime minister's response to his critics has been explosive and revealing. In recent interviews, Starmer has doubled down on calling his immigration policy racist and immoral.
Britain. The comments triggered an angry response from Nigel Farage and accusations that Labour is dragging politics into the gutter. Here's Beth's interview.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders, they're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. So why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours.
He claims to distinguish between the person and the policy, but his words have ignited a firestorm that threatens to tear apart what remains of Labour's coalition. What makes this even more devastating is the blatant hypocrisy exposed by his own government's actions. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has announced immigration measures virtually identical to those Starmer condemns as racist. The same policies suddenly become acceptable when proposed by Labour themselves. This contradiction has become so glaring that even Labour's own supporters struggle to defend it. But here's where it gets absolutely devastating for Labour. Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, isn't just gaining ground. They're now leading national polls with a staggering 12-point advantage over Labour. 34% of British voters would now choose Reform UK if an election were held tomorrow, while Labour has collapsed to just 22%. That's the lowest Labour has polled since 2009. The numbers tell a story of complete political devastation. Starmer's personal satisfaction ratings are the worst for any prime minister since polling began in 1977. 52% of voters say their view of Starmer has worsened since he took office. Even among his own Labour voters from 2024, 56% now hold a more negative view of him. This isn't just unpopularity. This is historical rejection on a scale that destroys political careers forever. The parliamentary confrontations have reached unprecedented levels of intensity. During recent exchanges in the Commons, Starmer erupted without warning, pointing an accusing finger at Farage and shouting about compassion. The Speaker was forced to invoke Standing Order 43. Parliamentary protocol had been shattered.
Gasps filled the chamber. Veteran MPs sat frozen, jaws hanging open. This was no longer debate. This was fury, raw, unrestrained, unprecedented, and then came the breaking point. The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, invoked a rule so ancient and obscure that most MPs had forgotten it even existed. Standing Order 43. With it, he ordered the Prime Minister himself to withdraw from the chamber immediately. The silence was absolute. The Prime Minister of Britain, the most powerful man in the country, had just been commanded to leave. Cameras flashed. Millions watched live. Starmer refused at first, standing defiantly, spitting out protests. But his voice was shaking now. Security moved closer. Step by step, the unthinkable unfolded. Starmer, shoulders slumped, was escorted out of Parliament like any other unruly MP. And standing in the chamber, calm and composed, was Nigel Farage, the man who had just forced the Prime Minister of Britain out of his seat of power. The scene wasn't just shocking. It was historic. For the first time in living memory, the authority of a sitting Prime Minister had crumbled before the eyes of the nation. But this was only the beginning. What followed would plunge the entire country into a political crisis unlike anything Britain has ever seen. The fallout.
For the first time in modern history, a sitting prime minister faced the humiliation of being ordered to withdraw from the chamber. Reform UK's response has been swift and brutal. Their representatives argue that Starmer is using inflammatory language to demonize Nigel Farage because he cannot beat him at the ballot box.
Now, the organisers of the Eurovision Song Contest are to hold a vote next month on whether Israel can take part after several countries threatened to boycott the competition. Spain, Ireland and Slovenia are among those who don't believe Israel should be allowed to take part until the war in Gaza ends. Arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer has this report.
For the last 2 years, away from the music, Eurovision has attracted scenes like these. While there's over half a year to go until the next contest, already countries are poised to vote. The issue in contention being whether Israel should be allowed to enter.
You can't avoid politics. If Israel is there, we won't be there.
As the world waits to see what happens with the negotiations over Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan, within the cultural world, there's no let-up in the increasing isolation.
They claim the prime minister is circling the drain, citing devastating polls that show his government's complete collapse in public support. The causes of this collapse read like a masterclass in political self-destruction. Starmer's government began with a donations scandal that exposed him accepting expensive gifts while cutting winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners. Farage has weaponized these human stories, pensioners losing their winter fuel allowance, family farms terrified about inheritance tax, small businesses struggling with national insurance increases.
Immediate human stories. He spoke of pensioners losing winter fuel allowance, of family farms worried about inheritance tax, and of small businesses grappling with rising national insurance.
He's translated macro policy failures into micro experiences that voters feel in their daily lives. The hypocrisy was so blatant, so morally tone-deaf, that even his own supporters couldn't defend it. Then came his immigration rhetoric that alienated his traditional left-wing base. In May 2025, Starmer suggested that uncontrolled immigration could turn Britain into an island of strangers. The backlash was immediate and devastating. When Reform UK councillors respond to being called racist, they now turn Starmer's words against him, arguing that if wanting border control makes them racist, they'll accept the label. They claim his rhetoric is one of the most irresponsible things a leader has ever done.
Well, you're a racist, aren't you? Let's be honest, you're a racist, and apparently so am I. We're racist. How do you feel about that, Layla Cunningham?
If wanting border control, wanting people to come here and pay their way, then fine, I'm racist. Call me whatever you want. In fact, I feel the more insults come our way, the more we're galvanized and we realize that we're fighting for this country. And to call us racist, to call Nigel Farage as leader of the country, to call millions of people that support him and to call him a racist and a danger to this country is one of the most irresponsible things I feel a leader has ever done.
I was utterly gobsmacked yesterday. We have to continue it today because, of course, he's rode back today, which is got him even more of a pickle in my mind. Because yesterday, I'm going to fight. That's incendiary, and this man is anti-British, which is that was almost the worst thing in my mind. And then basically, so stupid is he that he's saying to 15 million people, "You're racist." And then today, even more confusing. No. Nigel Farage is not a racist, he's a formidable man. I'm not calling these people racist, I'm just saying the policy is. But surely, Layla, by supporting a policy that's been labelled racist, that would mean you support racism, so you'd be a racist, or am I missing the point?
Of course, no, you're not missing the point. He knew exactly what he was doing. He did that to galvanize his base, and I think it probably did, because I heard comments on the radio and so forth. The base was galvanized. They were happy, and his cabinet members doubled down on it. Didn't Shabana Mahmood say it was worse than racism? For God's sake, what's worse than racism? But when leaders of our country smear millions of ordinary people as racist or a danger to this country, it's no longer politics, Jeremy. It is reckless, because some people might take that seriously. If you convince them that their neighbor is a threat or racist, some might do whatever it takes to silence them. And that, for me, incites division and violence. And some people say, oh, but you believe in free speech.
Muslim voters abandoned Labour in droves, with the party's vote share declining by 21 percentage points in council wards with over 20% Muslim residents. But Starmer's attempts to sound tough on immigration backfired spectacularly. Instead of winning over reform voters, he lost his core supporters while failing to convince anyone he was genuine. Political experts are calling it one of the most catastrophic strategic misjudgments in modern British politics. The government's push for digital ID cards has become another flashpoint of public anger. Labour's proposed system represents what critics call Soviet-style control mechanisms, where current rights become privileges distributed by the government based on behavior. Public opinion shifted dramatically, from 35% approval to minus 14% in just 24 hours after Starmer's speech announcing the policy. Reform UK has positioned itself as the defender against this assault on traditional British freedoms. The internal party chaos tells the real story of a government in complete meltdown. Multiple ministerial resignations have rocked Starmer's administration. His chief of staff, Sue Gray, resigned in October 2024. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner admitted to underpaying £40,000 in stamp duty. Cabinet meetings have devolved into shouting matches with ministers openly questioning Starmer's judgment. Over 40 Labour backbench MPs have now publicly distanced themselves from government policies, terrified of losing their seats. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and Reform UK are capitalizing on this chaos with ruthless efficiency. Farage links migration directly to falling GDP per capita, overcrowded schools, impossible housing markets, and stagnant wages. He questions whether the current parliamentary system truly reflects what the public wants. Their Veterans First campaign has surged 8 points in the polls in just 1 week. Working-class voters are abandoning Labour in historic numbers. Reform UK now holds on to 90% of their 2024 voters while attracting 39% of Conservative voters and 13% of Labour voters. The transformation of British politics is happening in real time. Reform UK won 677 seats in the 2025 local elections, polling in first place for the first time in any major electoral contest. Within months, they claim to have overtaken the Conservatives to become Britain's second largest party by membership. When Conservative leader Keir Starmer accused them of faking their numbers, Reform invited major news outlets to inspect their data. The Financial Times, Sky News, The Spectator, and the Daily Telegraph all confirmed the figures were accurate. Farage's response was devastating. He called the allegations disgraceful and threatened legal action unless Badenoch apologized. The contrast between Reform's momentum and the Conservatives' desperation couldn't be starker. But the most shocking development is how the British public now views the political landscape. For the first time, more Britons consider Reform UK the main opposition party than the Conservatives. 37% see Reform as the real opposition, compared to just 33% for the Tories. Even more devastating for the established order, 39% of Britons believe Nigel Farage is more likely to become Prime Minister than Conservative leader Keir Starmer at just 25%. This represents a complete inversion of British political expectations. A man who leads a party with just 5 MPs is now seen as more likely to reach number 10 than the leader of the OFI. Seal opposition. The latest YouGov projection shows the scale of potential change. If an election were held tomorrow, Reform UK would win 311 seats in the House of Commons, up from 5 last year. Labour would collapse to just 144 seats from their current 411. While Reform would fall 15 seats short of an outright majority, Farage would be in pole position to form a government, likely with Conservative support. The economic implications are staggering. Britain's 6th largest economy is already suffering from sluggish growth and inflation forecasts to be the highest among G7 nations this year. Political instability on this scale threatens to derail any economic recovery. International investors are watching nervously as Britain's political system appears to be fracturing along populist lines, mirroring trends across Europe where mainstream centrists are being crushed by nationalist movements. The parallels with European political upheavals are impossible to ignore. France's Emmanuel Macron faces similar challenges from Marine Le Pen's national rally. Germany's traditional parties struggle against the alternative for Germany. Italy, the Netherlands, and other European nations have already seen populist parties either take power or become dominant opposition forces. Britain, long considered immune to such dramatic political shifts, is now experiencing its own populist revolution. Reform UK's appeal extends far beyond traditional right-wing voters. 19% of young voters now back Farage's party compared to just 5% for the Conservatives. This represents a fundamental shift in British political allegiances that could last for decades. The party's message of controlled immigration, economic nationalism, and rejection of elite consensus resonates across demographic lines in ways that terrify the political establishment. Social media amplifies Reform's message with devastating effectiveness. The hashtag #VeteransFirst trended globally for 6 straight days, with over 2.3 million posts and 45 million engagements. Professional content creators produce viral videos contrasting government spending on migrant accommodation with homeless veterans, generating massive emotional responses that traditional media cannot match. The algorithms reward this content because engagement rates are through the roof, creating a feedback loop that amplifies Reform's narrative faster than any government response can contain it. Inside Westminster, panic is spreading through both Labour and Conservative ranks. Labour MPs privately discuss whether Starmer can survive until the next election, with some suggesting he should step down for the party's good. Conservative MPs watch their traditional voter base defect to Reform in unprecedented numbers, knowing their party faces potential extinction as a major political force. The center ground of British politics is collapsing, leaving voters with increasingly polarized choices between a failing Labour government and a surging populist movement. But perhaps the most significant development is Reform's evolution from protest party to government in waiting. Farage has assembled a professional operation with serious policy proposals and experienced political operators. The party's conference in Birmingham showcased a movement confident of taking power, not just causing disruption. Reform's board now includes serious business figures and former Conservative politicians who bring governmental experience to what was once considered a fringe movement. The international ramifications extend far beyond Britain's borders. A Reform UK government would fundamentally alter Britain's relationship with the European Union, potentially pursuing even harder Brexit policies. Relations with the United States could shift dramatically, especially given Farage's close ties to Donald Trump's political movement. NATO commitments might face scrutiny under a government skeptical of international institutions. Global markets are already pricing in political risk as Britain's traditional two-party system appears to be breaking down permanently. The speed of this transformation has shocked even seasoned political observers. Just 18 months ago, Labour won a historic landslide that seemed to guarantee a decade in power. Conservative dominance of British politics since 2010 appeared permanently shattered. Reform UK was considered a minor irritant, capable of winning protest votes but never real power. Today, every assumption about British politics lies in ruins. The established order faces an existential threat that could reshape the nation's political landscape for generations. What makes this collapse so devastating is its comprehensiveness. Starmer isn't just losing votes to Reform UK. Labour supporters are defecting to the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, and simply staying home in disgust. The party's traditional working-class base feels betrayed by elite London politicians who seem more concerned with international virtue signaling than domestic problems. Middle-class professionals who voted Labour to remove the Conservatives are horrified by the government's incompetence and hypocrisy. The coalition that delivered Labour's landslide is fracturing beyond repair. Reform UK's rise represents more than electoral success. It symbolizes a fundamental rejection of the political establishment's authority. Voters who feel ignored, betrayed, and lectured to by mainstream politicians are turning to a movement that promises to tear down the system and rebuild it according to their values. Whether Reform can deliver on these promises remains to be seen, but their ability to channel public anger into political momentum is undeniable. The next few months will determine whether this represents a temporary protest or a permanent realignment of British democracy. Early indicators suggest the latter. Reform's membership continues growing while Labour and Conservative membership stagnates. Fundraising operations that once struggled now attract significant donations from business figures and ordinary supporters alike. Most importantly, Reform's message resonates with voters across traditional party lines, suggesting their appeal extends beyond typical protest vote patterns. Britain stands at a crossroads. The comfortable assumptions of post-war politics are crumbling as voters reject the established order in favor of radical change. Keir Starmer's historic unpopularity represents more than personal failure. It symbolizes the complete breakdown of elite consensus politics in favor of populist alternatives that promise to restore national sovereignty, control immigration, and prioritize British citizens above international obligations. This isn't just another political cycle. This is a revolution in slow motion that could transform Britain as dramatically as Brexit did, but with even more profound consequences for the nation's future. The old order is dying, and what emerges from its collapse will define British politics for decades to come. What do you think? Has Keir Starmer's government failed so completely that British voters will never trust Labour again? Is Reform UK's rise unstoppable, or can the established parties recover? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to understand what's really happening in British politics right now. The mainstream media won't tell you how complete this political collapse really is, but we will.